Hello everyone. Just before we start streaming, I'm going to show you a slide because there's some interactive content you can connect with your phone and a QR code. So let me know it's okay. It's okay? Great. First, we'd just like to thank Chris Ward for the title of the talk. It's not mine, so he found the title for me. I know he's not there today, but he probably watches the recording. So I'm Nicolas Massart, and I work for Pegasus, part of Consensus, and I'm working specifically on the documentation and on the customer support. So today I'm going to show you things about the feedback and how we use your feedback, customers' feedback, but also internal feedback to improve the products, improve the processes, and improve the way we work on Pegasus products. So I said it's an interactive talk, so you can just connect to Slido. There's a code, 1337, and if you don't have the password for Wi-Fi yet, it's on the page. This will give you the ability to ask questions during the talk. You can even ask anonymous questions if you don't want to show your name. And during the talk, you see there's some interaction with you, and I hope you will be interacting a bit. So to talk about the feedback, I wanted to do something like, on the YouTube, you can see the top 6 of a lot of things. So here is going to be the top 6 of support issues. So as in the customer support, but also in the community support, we had very, very frequent questions, always about the same things. So I'm going first to show you this kind of question, and then I'm going to explain how we deal with it, how we improve our products, given the issues we encountered. And the first one, for the people who try to contribute to our products, and specifically to Hyperledger Besu, which is an open source software hosted by Hyperledger Foundation, we have an issue in the contribution, which makes mostly all the contributors fail on the first contribution because of what we call the DCO. So the DCO is a Developer Certificate of Origin, and it's something you have to do when you do your commits in the GitHub repository. Specifically for Besu, it's something we have from the Linux Foundation. It's a rule for legal reasons, and there's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to explain that today, but the sign-off, the missing sign-off, is one of the big issues. So usually it ends either for us to lose time to explain to the contributor how to fix that, or even sometime, and most of the time, the contributors just abandons the contribution, and it's a shame because it's really not a technical issue, and we would like people to contribute more. So this is our first issue, and we really try to improve about that. It's probably more communication than technical things, but there's some also some ways to improve it technically. But this was the 6th issue on the list. We're going to increase and to the best issue. The 5th one is about networks, ports, protocol, and interfaces. For those who started using Ethereum clients, you probably ended with this. It's a common matter that people don't really know how they have to open their firewall, their ports, which port is for TCP, which port is for UDP. If you don't want discovery on P2P, do you have to use the TCP or the UDP? It's complex, clearly, but we really try to make some effort, mostly in the documentation, to explain that. This is something we are aware about, and this is one of the most frequent questions we have on the customer support. I'm not going to explain what are each of these It's just showing you the question. If you have questions about that, either go to Besu documentation or come and see me after the talk, and I can talk about more about this. The fourth is the inode addresses. So you probably know that every node is able to contact nodes on the network because they display an address, and this address looks something like that. It's a format where you have to build this address from your node private key, and from this private key you're going to have a public key, and then you build this address, and you have to know the host IP, and you can't use a DNS because it's IP only, and you have to know the port on which you are exporting this service. So it may be complicated. If you just go on Besu doc, we made this effort to explain how to have each part of the inode address, and how to export the public key that you can use in your inode address. The third is something that lasts from the 2016, the DAO hack, and that ended including chain ID and network IDs in Ethereum. So it's from the IP 155, and it introduced a new number to make a difference between the transaction on the Ethereum ETH chain and the ETC, Ethereum Classic chain, just to make sure you can't replay the transaction. So mostly we have questions about is chain ID the same than network ID? Do they have to be the same? What's the difference? What happens if we use some chain ID or network ID that are already used on a public network, even if we're on a private network? So this is the kind of question we deal with. In Besu, specifically, we have also sometime weird way to use command line options. One of them is the network ID option, which is an option that overrides the network ID, but by default, if you don't use this, you have a network ID that will be the same as the chain ID, and the chain ID is defined in the Genesis file. And if you use the dash network option, which is the same but without the dash ID, so the names looks pretty much the same, you have a predefined network ID and chain ID matching the public network. So it's pretty complicated, and it's one of the issue we have with a few of our customers and also on the community. And the first one, the second one, sorry, is how to handle the Genesis configuration. So I'm going to have a quiz here for the people who have access to the slider. You can join the quiz directly, and there's a few questions. And I let you like 1 minute to fill that. So during this, I'm going to explain a bit about this Genesis issue. The Genesis issue is that the file is pretty complex, and people deal with terms that are very tightly linked to the core way of Besu to work. And it talks about block time, about also the type of consensus algorithm. So either it's proof of work or IBFT POA. There's also predefined accounts, the one you can find for people had Ether on the pre-sale. So this file is pretty complex. The question was, is there a configuration format, which is the official version? Most of you said there's no standard, and it's the correct answer, because obviously we can't rely on something common for all the clients to configure their Genesis files. So this is an issue we have also, is because most people are used to use Get. Clearly, we have only 12 Pantheon, Pantheon was the previous name of Bezu. I'm still very attached to it. We have only 12 Bezu nodes on the mainnet, so it's very, very small compared to other clients. So people try to migrate or use the same Genesis files, and this is usually a source of confusion. You'll come back to the Pegasus booth after that, and people who win will probably have some goodies. So of course there's no standard, and the Bezu configuration also includes the Genesis configuration, but also network configuration. So we made an attempt to clarify that in the doc. It's not perfect yet. We're still working on it. Maybe it will change in the future. We will adapt another format. We will get inspired from what Ethereum 2 is doing. I don't know. But this is the second issue. And the first issue we have is about boot nodes, because Bezu, I apologize, Bezu is a bit different than others about how they handle boot nodes. So boot node is sorry. I'm not going to give you the answer. You can answer that. It's not a contest. It's just you have 3 questions. You can check the one you want and tell me what's a boot node for you. And so one answer, 3, 5. Great. So boot node is a regular node that we use as a venue for discovery. This is true. But it's also true that it's special mode without chain data, but not for Bezu, for other contexts, for other clients, for guests, for instance. It's also the first node of a network. Otherwise, except if you statically set the IPs and the inode addresses of your node, they don't have any way to discover each other. So this is also true. That is, so the 3 of them are true, but not every time, not in all clients, not in all contexts. On Bezu, the boot node is just a regular node. It syncs with the network. It has the full chain in its database. It can be an RPC node. It can be also a GraphQL endpoint. It can be an endpoint for metrics. It can be just any node. One thing that you have to take care about is, because it's a boot node, so it's a node where other nodes are meeting, it has to be up all the time. If you are not sure that your node is able to be up 100% of the time, maybe it's a good idea to have more than one node, perhaps 3 is a good number, and use the tools you have on your infrastructure, like Kubernetes, to restart a node if you only have 2 because one failed, and make sure that they use static addresses to make all the nodes able to discover that themselves. So this was the issue, and now we have this feedback process. So feedback process, just very quick note on what is feedback. We use it in the informational term, meaning that we get your information back after you use the process, and that we take your advice in account. And this is really what it is. We expect you to communicate either via using the community chat, Gitter, even the forms we have on the doc site. The system we use is a very classic one. The difference is how we're going to process the data. So first we do things. We just code, we just deliver the software, or we deliver the doc. We consider the doc as the same level as the software. If you have a software and you have a crappy doc, you're not going to be able to use it. And if you have a great doc but the software is buggy, it's going to be an issue too. So we really have to have both of them. Once you deliver all these things, you have to measure them. You have to make sure it works. And once you have the metrics, you have to analyze them, see if it's really working or not, if it's just some bias or some effects of people using it strange way. And you have to correct. And by that, I mean that you have to correct in the good way and in the bad way. So to do, we test, we develop, we document, we release the software, and of course we promote it. For the measures, we run benchmarks like number of transactions per second, number of nodes able to communicate together without crash. We try to have users' feedback. So on the doc side, for instance, you have a Hotjar a jar widget, which helps us to have feedback on each doc page, but you can also give feedback on the software using Gitter or Hyperledger Rocket Chat, and we have automated feedback. We also get statistics, mostly using Google Analytics. It's a bit centralized, but it's what we have. And once we have all these data, we try to analyze the causes of failures, but also the cases of successes, because most of the time it's very easy from the statistics, from the logs, to see what failed, but you may pass by something that worked unexpectedly, something like a side effect, making your software better, and you're not aware of it. And the worst is not to be aware of it and just discuss it at the next release, because people are going to be used to it, and you were not even aware it was a feature of your software. So we really try to measure that too. Then we try to correct, to fix. Of course, if it's an unexpected announcement, we don't fix it, but we try to improve it and to make it documented and make sure that it's going to be in the next release and even in the next software. If we work on a client for Ethereum 2 and then we reuse this same concepts and same things. And of course, without creating new issues. That's what we try to do. If you develop the software, you know that's not always the case, but we really try to. And what happens is that with all this feedback, you end with a lot of actors talking together. So it goes from the R&D team to the documentation team to the developers, but also the customers, the marketing team and the community users. Everyone is talking together. And on this, you add some tools to communicate. We have at least 2 Jira for the moment, Reddit, email sometime, Twitter, Stack Exchange, Discord server for Ethereum 2. We have private Slack for Pegasus, and we also have GitHub issues and Gitter and Hyperledger Rocket Chat. So it's starting to be a bit difficult to be aware of all the feedback and not let some fall into the cracks. There's an obvious path to fix this, having everything in one place. We could have everyone organized around the central repository for feedback, but one issue with that is this central place cannot fail. And given we're working in the decentralized environment, we try to eat our own dog food, as we say, and relying on a centralized system is probably not the right thing, because central source means one tool, one entry point. That's great. It's cheaper sometimes, but it also reduces diversity of feedbacks. People don't give the same feedback given the tools. You may give a more formal feedback in an email than you give on a Gitter or on an instant chat. It makes a strong dependency on the system, which has to be up all the time. Liveliness is very important, and it cannot fail. And also there's too much noise, because you're going to have feedback on everything, on every part, on the protocol, on the communication with dApps, on the database, on every aspect of the software. And of course, there will always be uncontrolled chaos. So trying to organize something in a very straight, centralized way is probably trying to fight nature. So one way we deal with that is that we worked with interest clusters, meaning people are going to interact with each other around a subject, a specific matter, and the groups are going to be smaller. The interest clusters here are the gray parts on the diagram. They can overlap sometime, but if you're interested in the adoption, you're not going to have a noise from the UX part, or if you're interested in stability and performances, you may not look at the innovation part. Everyone is going to be able to communicate, but we try to make some specific subjects for everyone. The pros of that is stronger, stronger and more autonomous, because people can deal with the way they want to give feedback on a specific subject, specific matter, in a different way than another team. The cons, of course, is there's some communication, some more communication, and there's also more communication channels, but you don't have to be in each of them. And it also requires flexibility, but I think this drawback is really what makes the strength of what we call the mesh on Ethereum and this decentralized network. It requires some work, it requires some flexibility, and to adapt to this new system is pretty new for a lot of people who came from the very centralized and perhaps even more in France, and where you have a top-down decision system. So it's hard, but really I think we have to do that, at least to have processes that match the products we work on. In Pegasus, we mostly use what we call the coin, or we don't call this one, it's not a name we forged. It's called the coin model, so we analyze the context of every situation, and we try to give factual description of the things of the event. We also give the impact. This is a more personal way to see the event. For me, it made me feel like I was annoyed by this feature, or by the way you dealt with this bug. But because we're human and we can't really be objective on everything, so we have to know that and just deal with it. And the next step is how, knowing that we're going to improve, we're going to fix this issue. This is a pretty well running process. It works for the software, but it also works between individuals, and that's something we do between colleagues, frequently asking for feedback about the way we work, about the way we deal with others. It's not just for software. The rule for feedback, speaking about how people work or about the software, is always that you have to create a safe environment. Make the people confident that it's not going to be blamed. You probably know this blame function on most Git clients. This is a name I really don't like, because it's not just blaming sometime, it's just finding an issue. Issues happen, we have to know that. We have to say also positive things. When you have something bad to say, it may be interesting also not to force yourself to find positive things. Sometimes there are no positive things, but even if there's no positive things on the feature or on the way the software works, there may be some positive, like you expect it to improve, for instance, and not just say it's a bad feature or you did bad work. And also you have to be specific. Don't say, I don't like the way you work. It's more, at this specific moment with this feature, you did this, and I think it made my daily work a bit harder, and I had issues with the customer, for instance. It also has to be immediate and make sure that you don't let the thing roast for 3 months before saying it. And as I said, explain the impact, the fact that, for instance, you had an issue with customer, you lost a deal, you just lost a customer, it happens. It's not a good thing, but it's the impact of perhaps a bug. And try to assume good intent and be nice with people. I don't think people try to make mistakes on purpose. And one last thing about that, I just had a dream. I know a lot of people are starting their talk with I had a dream, but I just finish it like this. I had a dream that GitHub was renaming the issue tab into feedback or comments, because when you see the issue tab, you're incentivized to just put bad things in it, bugs or features that you would like to see because it's not working as expected, because it's not fulfilling your needs. But if we had some feedback or comments tab instead, perhaps we would have more people saying that they like the product. It's also a way to make the developers prouder of what they do, and they work well when they like what they do. There's some questions, so I don't know if people in this room and ask this question, because it's live stream, so maybe it's someone on the internet, I don't know. First, is there some live questions in the room? Anyone want to have the mic to ask one? Great, my backup plan with online question worked. So, can you show an example of DCO? No, because I'm in full screen with my presentation, and it's going to be a mess, honestly, so I don't want to do that. But if you join me or contact me just after the talk, I will show you. If it's someone online, I'm going to post answers to this question online aside of the talk. What happens when feedback is clearly wrong? They have a wrong idea about something. Yeah, it happens. First, you really have to think if it's really wrong. My first question is, what are we doing wrong to make this user think that this wrong idea is good? It may be something we did not think about on the way to use the software. It may be a way we wrote the documentation that let the user think that it could do this improvement, which is clearly not one from our perspective. We also have to discuss with the customer or the community why we think this issue is bad. I would say that if we do that, a good part of the thing we could consider as bad feedback is not completely bad. This is on the content of the feedback. On the form of the feedback, if the person is aggressive, for instance, if it's just a troll. For trolls, you know the saying, we don't feed trolls. So in this case, we just ignore them. If it's aggressive, we just try to calm down and don't respond to violence by violence. It doesn't bring good things. So sometimes it doesn't work. We just have to shut down the conversation and ignore it. But most of the time we have customers who are a bit aggressive. Honestly, we never had people very aggressive. We had people a bit aggressive, but then if you explain that you're going to take his idea into consideration first, that you're going to listen to this person, it usually smoothen things. Very honestly, we never had very big incidents that were not able to be solved. Can you change the DCO process to CLA? No. That's something we can't work on very honestly, because it's a prerequisite from the Linux Foundation. So except leaving the Linux Foundation, which is currently not possible without leaving Besu, and we don't want that. It's our baby. We want to continue taking care of it. This is a legal requirement we can't change. What we can do is first communicate more. I had some ideas about how to intercept new contributors before they do this mistake. For instance, having a trigger that tells me when someone forks the Besu repo, and so just try to connect with this person, either using GitHub or trying to find the right profile on LinkedIn or on Twitter. It worked a few times. And then we were able to explain how to contribute correctly. Felipe here is also making a great work trying to explain how the community works and bring some new developers. So if you have this kind of question, you can ask. But honestly, no, we can't just erase the DCO. Of course, it's just for Besu and the Besu doc repository. We have 2 repositories. And why we have 2 repositories will be another talk. And for the other Pegasus products, like Orion, Signer, or what we're building for Ethereum 2, which is called Teku, you don't have the DCO. It's a CLA, so you won't have the issue. That's it. Now, there's this last poll if you want to anonymously, and it's not going to show on the screen, say that you liked or not. There's a rating on 4 stars for this talk. And I would like to thank you for the people who participate and try to make this a bit more interactive. Thank you.